I have a confession to make. I was terrified of losing my job, but when I actually did, it improved our finances. At the time, I was working in a suburb of Cleveland at a psychological consulting firm. And I loved my job, but I hated the people I worked for. I was the manager of learning and organizational development, which was really cool because my background is in psychological research. And so it was really awesome to be able to find a job in Cleveland, which is not the easiest job market, that actually had something to do with my degree. So anybody who knows anything about mental health knows that it's a tough field, they work you hard, the pay is low. And I was thrilled to be in the private sector and to have a consultant position and to be doing something related to my degree, which doesn't always happen, right? So in my job, I would train employees at workplaces or hire and train trainers, design courses for trainers, that sort of thing. And it was on a number of topics. Sometimes it was workplace wellness, sometimes it was financial advice and planning, sometimes it was on stress and burnout. Really, we helped HR with the mental health and everyday practical aspects of things as kind of an adjunct. We were doing this through an employee assistance program. It was a cool job. The company had issues though. So first off, I had a horrible commute. It really depended on what time of day and what traffic was doing, but if there was no traffic whatsoever, I could get to work in about 40 minutes from my house. So if there was traffic, it was more like a 2-hour drive. And anybody who's lived in a major metro knows that at the beginning and end of work, there's a lot of traffic. So there were nights that I wasn't getting home until like 7 o'clock at night. Another thing I had to do was there were these things called critical incident stress debriefings. So what those are is anytime anything really traumatic or upsetting happens at work, we had a service where we could send in a counselor and they would talk to employees about what happened, help them decompress, help them cope. And as you can imagine, that could be very, very stressful. A lot of times this was bank robberies for some of our clients that were financial institutions, some physical fights that happened at work. And we would get busy with these. And even though I wasn't part of that core team, I would often be involved in those projects. And it was something I wasn't compensated for. I was salary, so I wasn't getting paid for the hours I was putting in. I was putting in a lot of hours. I was also driving all over the state because we didn't have good trainer coverage. And so I'd be driving 3 or 4 hours down to Dayton and Cincinnati to do trainings, but also to go down there and meet trainers and vet them and interview them, to see them doing trainings in person. Yes, there are virtual trainings and virtual ways to do it, but it was better to drop in so I could see what they were like when they didn't know that somebody was vetting them. So I was driving all over the state, monster commute, critical incident stress debriefings, and my coworkers didn't have any boundaries. People were coming into my office during webinars when I had a sign on my door to not do that. When I was doing these Zoom trainings, and I'd have a bunch of bankers, a bunch of college professors, a bunch of teachers on the call, I have somebody knocking on my door and interrupting it, even though I said not to, and even though it wasn't an emergency, it would happen. I mean, when I say the boundary violations were bad, at the time I worked on the 4th floor. And I had to stop going to the ladies' room on the 4th floor, started going on the 3rd floor, because if I went to the ladies' room on the 4th floor, this is a true story, I dressed up for work. I had suit jacket and a dress, and I had heels. People would see my high heels. And so coworkers would come in looking for me and start talking to me about work while I was on the toilet. No boundaries. And so you can imagine how often people would call in the middle of the night or want to talk to me about non-urgent work things in my free time. And I was salary, so I didn't really have any room to push back. And because it was in mental health, it was not a good paying position. I could have made a lot more working at Costco, just for comparison. So because of all this stress, I started finding ways to cope. Now, some of those were really constructive. One of the things I started to do was to write a lot and to work on a manuscript of a book I'd written years ago. And that was really good because I ended up eventually writing a book, publishing it, publishing more, making a lot of money doing freelance writing online. I actually eventually pivoted into that, but I'll get more into that in a minute. I started coping with it in other ways that weren't healthy. And there were a couple of major ones. The biggest one was retail therapy. So as I mentioned, I was dressing up a lot, looking professional and polished, partly because I had to, yeah. But I also was so stressed that I started kind of coping with my clothing. So I would get really nice suit jackets and shoes and expensive makeup and dress. And I bought so many clothes. I spent so much money on these clothes. Yes, it was for work, but the job didn't pay well. And while I was expected to dress to a certain standard, having more outfits didn't help me, and it didn't actually make me feel any better. I mean, some days it was almost like armor. I would actually kind of put on my cardigan or my bolero jacket or my suit coat. I'd be like, to battle. I literally would say that. This is my armor. But it was really expensive. Not to mention all the commuting I was doing, the wear and tear of my car. I could expense some of my work travel, but not all of it. My boss was being really horrible about it at the time. It did not feel copacetic. I know more about it now. I would have done things differently. So the wear and tear on the car, the gas, the tolls, all of that, it's very expensive. And the 40 minutes to 2-hour commute completely did not get compensated for that. Plus, I was so exhausted as I'd come home at 7 o'clock at night. A lot of times I'd be leaving by 6:30 in the morning to try to beat the traffic. I was getting up at like 5, that I just didn't have the energy to cook or meal plan. My husband also works full time. Nobody had the energy to cook. There are lots of pizza nights, which are not healthy, expensive. We were just always ordering takeout. And the big thing was, even if he could cook, he didn't know when I was getting home half the time at night because I didn't know I was stuck in traffic. So when I did try to cook, things would go bad because my plans would get shelved. I'd be so miserable. And people would be calling me at night at work even after I got out. I worked really hard for this place. And one of the things I was doing there was a lot of cost-cutting measures without sacrificing quality. So I mentioned I was recruiting a bunch of trainers in other places to get travel costs down so we weren't paying as much in travel costs. I also negotiated some contracts for some of our local presenters that were win-win. It cost us less and it paid them in a way that they liked better. It was a huge savings for us. I had just done this. It was the end of January. I had my performance review for the year and I got more PTO. The boss wasn't giving raises to anybody that year. Notorious cheapskate, ran us ragged, but wasn't surprised. I just got a promotion and a raise like the last time around too, and that was also cited. My performance review was good, had no concerns. I was going on pre-approved medical leave. I was having my tonsils out. I was in my 30s at the time, so if you don't know, tonsillectomy is really simple. If you're a kid, kids heal really fast from it. It's actually a much tougher recovery for adults, believe it or not. And they usually recommend that you have a couple weeks off. I actually had a really tough course because about a week after my tonsillectomy, I had a hemorrhage and I had to go back to the hospital because one of my vessels wasn't properly cauterized. Fun fact, that is the first time a doctor ever apologized to me was my surgeon when that happened. And you know, they're so scared of malpractice. It was very shocking for him to do that, but yeah. So I got back to work and I started working from home the first day because after the hemorrhage, my surgeon said that I should stay at my house rather than going all the way across town to my office because the hospital was really close to my house, and because of the traffic and stuff, he didn't want me being that far away in case I needed to go and get surgery again. I had to go back and, you know, if I had another hemorrhage, right? So I was my first day back, and this is pre-approved medical leave. I just had a good performance review. I came back and they let me go. I ended up having like a whole arbitration case about this whole thing. I won't go into too many details, but the state of Ohio sided with me. Here are a few things. This is all alleged. Don't come at me, bro, but I noticed a few things. I had saved all this money right before I went on medical leave, pre-approved medical leave. I had left instructions. When I came back, they're like, nah, don't bother returning. And I immediately saw a position with my exact salary being posted at the other branch of our company in a different city. So basically they moved my job and didn't take me with it, didn't give me an opportunity. And everything had been so cutthroat and so nasty there for so long. Like I said, I love my work. I love the clients we worked with, but my coworkers were, ooh. I think what happened was they were like, oh, we got the money out of her, we saved that. We'd like to reorganize, but they were too clumsy about it. They moved the money and they just got rid of my job because they figured they'd gotten everything they wanted out of me and the program could run better and cheaper without somebody overseeing it. Joke's on them, they've actually gone out of business and the program started tanking after I left. Yes, I left good detailed instructions for my medical leave, but there was a lot I was doing and I had planned for it that went by the wayside once I was gone. Like, I was actually doing good work. That's the funny thing. Sometimes if you're good at your job, it's very easy for people to overlook it because everything's running smoothly, right? And I was so busy, it was hard to toot my own horn, but I digress. Anyway, I had a case and the state of Ohio sided with me, which was a big deal because they tend to give the benefit of the doubt to the employer, but it was such an egregious case that they sided with me. I remember the judge at the very end, after everything was over, took me aside and she was like, I never do this, but I really wanted to tell you that this is one of the most egregious cases of employee abuse I have ever seen. You were done dirty. They tried to act like they were firing me for cause where it was clearly a layoff. I was clearly a good employee and we had to submit a bunch of different paperwork and I was really good with my paperwork. I was on top of it. I met all the deadlines. I was really detailed. All of my evidence actually supported what I was saying. They were submitting evidence that did not support what they were saying. They actually submitted the good performance review and said it was bad. And they also did not submit it on time. They were actually late on their response of the document and the judge had to allow it. But yeah, so that whole situation, I was made whole and that helped me a little bit. It basically helped bridge the gap until I could get my business going. And it also gave me more time to focus on my business and building that up. I was able to do lots of freelance writing pitches. I put out several books. I blogged daily online every day for 5 years. I built multiple brands. I've done everything I've done. I've made my living for the last 7 years full-time online as a creative person, business person, and a content creator because I lost my job. It was a little rough in the beginning, especially before things were settled. When I'd lost my job and they didn't want to pay me anything and I had to make things right, I had to go through that process, through that case. There was a gap there where there wasn't money coming in other than the little bit that I was making at my side hustle. But what I noticed was I stopped retail therapy. I stopped needing to buy stuff. I was depressed because I was like, they done me dirty. This is bad. And I was worried about money, but I wasn't doing the retail therapy. I stopped that because I couldn't do that anymore. And I immediately started cooking from scratch, which I really like to cook, but I couldn't do it before. But all of a sudden I had a lot of time and energy to do that, even though I was depressed. And I figured out how to do that. Saved a lot of money doing from scratch cooking, got us eating healthier. And obviously I saved a lot of money on gas. And then we got a little help when I won my case. Wasn't a huge amount, but it ended up being effectively acting like a severance. And I helped my husband with some of his career stuff. Because I had worked in the kind of workplace psychology space, I knew a lot about kind of the corporate psych and the management theory. I helped him get his resume better. I got him to get a management position. And about the time that things were getting hairy with the money from the case, once that had played out, he got a better job that paid more and my business took off. And it's been great ever since. We've continued to build both of those things and we're happier than we've ever been and financially stable. So yeah, that's the story of how I lost my job and it improved our financial situation. Anyway, it's been great talking to you as always. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.